In Osun State, an APC governorship hopeful is making headlines with a bold promise to end what he calls the culture of reckless borrowing if elected. Now, the aspirant says the state's rising debt profile threatens development, setting the stage for a heated debate on fiscal discipline, governance, and also accountability in the coming seasons of the polls. Now, joining me to discuss this is Engineer Dideolu Falobi, is the governorship aspirant of the All Progressives Congress, Osun State. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Tapo. Good evening.
All right, you seem to have raised the dust as regards the economic profile of the state, saying that it appears the state is borrowing astronomically, and it's become something pretty worrisome. What do you know? Okay,
well, the first thing is that I'm going to hit you a bit below the belt, so be ready for that.
Okay.
If you went through the headlines, he spoke to, I will stop reckless borrowing. If you went through the story, I spoke to, we will borrow but we will not be reckless. So there are two things. So the challenge with the media today is to cast headlines to suit their purpose. And as far as I could recall, that was not the essence of that statement. You go and read, and it's not, it doesn't even
And that's why we're having this conversation,
yes,
to set the record straight and,
yes,
not give room for any misinterpretations. Yeah. So
let me go on. Now, the real issue is that there is really nothing wrong in borrowing. The most important thing is to, recognize that the only source of funding a state is not to borrow. It's not the only source. Yes, you can borrow, there are other sources. And to be more innovative in first what you borrow to fund and others, and how much you expect other sources of funding. So basically, and that was what I was speaking to. I was speaking to, for example, the use of diaspora funds for projects that we can get the diaspora to create a bond for them and come in and invest in certain projects that will be useful. I was also alluding to the opportunity to actually, rather than borrow, use what is called equity to fund some projects that are, bankable. So those are some of the things that I was speaking to. So basically, I'm not averse to borrowing. I'm in the private sector, but it must not be reckless. And as far as the government in the state is concerned, preceding governments, there have been different uses of loans and all that.
So for you, would you say that some of these borrowed monies are being used for projects or channeled into avenues that you would say are prudent or justifiable?
Well, you first must look at within the state. If you look back at the Ademola regime, for example, there was quite a lot of, there was some borrowing, and there was quite a lot of what I would call projects that were tied down to direct debit order, for the state's allocation, which led to some challenges. And my challenge with borrowing in Nigeria has always been that sometimes there are things that we shouldn't borrow for, that we should actually encourage equity. I'll give an example. If you are constructing a road that you can tow and a road that can pay for itself, you don't need to go out borrowing and create debt to do it. You can do part financing with equity and so on. And that's similar to what's happening now on Lagos Coastal Road, where it is partly government funding and a lot of private sector funding. And these are some, because you see, the challenge is this. When you go out borrowing for everything, you then discover that you leave what I call essential but not bankable projects, like education, healthcare, food security, and so on, to suffer. So you see, a lot of funding is going to what we call infrastructure. Roads, massive roads are being constructed. Even it's not about borrowing, it's about any fund available to the state. But we need to plow back some of them to what I call essential projects that are not going to pay back immediately. They are intangible in terms of how they pay back. So those are the kind of things that we're talking about. But because a lot of people now see it in government, you borrow, You spend on the roads, and then it's gone, and then you begin to pay back, and you have no money for other essential services. And that's what I'm trying to discourage.
All right. Let's bring it to Osun State, where some would say that when you rank Osun State amongst states that generate revenue to finance itself, Osun State maybe doesn't even make it, to the tops on the list. Many would even say I've questioned the viability of the state itself to be able to self-finance. For you, do you see some potential here that a state like Osun can generate internal revenue and finance itself even without having to wait for allocation?
I'm very positive that Osun State doesn't need to have an allocation if our funds have been managed well, if we have been more innovative.
In what areas?
Okay, I'll give an example. I had spoken in the past to what I call agro-allied industries. And I had spoken to setting up industries that will process agricultural products that are available within the community. And what that does is that create a lot of multiplier effect. That's one. I've spoken about tourism. What we have in Osun State today are a lot of tourism opportunities that are not being exploited, are not being harnessed, are not being properly harnessed to be able to attract the right level of tourists. We have spoken to what I would call the human capacity in Osun. I mean, look at the number of academics, number of businessmen, and so on. That how much of those people have been put together to come and invest back at home. How much of the high net worth individuals can point to major investments in terms that will empower the people, employ the people. And I can go on and go on. There's the creative industry. Look at Osogbo. Osogbo used to be the center of creativity. When you talk of the Nikki Center, the Shrine, Osogbo was like a hot pot in those days, where and it can still be where you get the best of.
I mean, this idea is for many political office holders. They are not novel ideas. They are pretty much even aware of some of them. The tourism potential, for instance. But the question keeps coming up as to why none of these ideas seem to have been implemented, or maybe implemented at commercial level.
Political will and focus. Political will, basically. It's very easy to get lost in the what I would call the sweet side of governance, the major projects, the infrastructures, and so on and so on. And then what I call the very critical life-sustaining, state-developing projects are lost. And that's what is happening. So I'll give an example. We have the Irinjisha waterfalls. We've been talking about this forever. A lot of people could come. If you were at the last Osogbo Festival, you could see how many people, despite the little publicity, the very limited coordination and harnessing that went with it, were still able to come. So you can imagine that alone could attract year-round visitors from all over the world. I don't know whether you've been to the Gambia. In that country, fairly small country, the only source of income that they have is largely tourism. The hotels, the tourism centers, everything is programmed to suck in tourists and provide the best for them. And Osun is well suited for that. Then let's talk about agriculture. There's nothing you drop in Osun that doesn't grow. Let's talk of mining. Let me tell you, Osun is big enough to be a country on its own. So if the Osun were a country, would you be borrowing from them other aspects in Nigeria because we want to survive? And the same thing applies to every state in Nigeria.
All right. Let's bring it to the administration of Governor Adeleke so far. If you were to rate his performance as governor in the past years, and some of the things he's been able to achieve, what would you score him?
Well, you see, the only thing I can say to answer you is to say that if Adeleke, if I was satisfied with what he was doing, I won't even bother to contest.
So you're not satisfied?
Well, yes, I'm not. That's why I'm out.
Because anybody can choose to contest for personal ambition.
Well, I've just told you why I'm contesting. I could have done it 20 years ago. And it's not about Adeleke alone. And that's why in my move, I'm not personalizing issues. You and I know how our country is. And there's a lot of work to be done. And there's nothing wrong in all of us getting involved in that work. He might have put in his best. I'm not satisfied personally.
What areas? Let's pick maybe top 2 areas you are not satisfied with.
Okay, I could speak to the level of insecurity in Osun State.
Insecurity in Osun State.
Yes, is not acceptable. I could speak to the level of crime, and the insecurity is a bit different. Today, a lot of youths are on the streets. They are not employed. Nobody's creating their employment. Nobody's really seriously thinking about it. So what do you have? They engage in all sorts of vices that has almost become the norm. Call it Yahoo, whatever it is. I don't blame those youths. We have not created opportunities for them. So that's one. So for me, and all this did not happen in 4 years of Adeleke. So I could also be partly to be blamed over the time. Okay, what were you looking? Why did you get involved? Whatever I had done. So what I'm saying is that at a point in life, you leave the comfort zone and say, look, let me see what I can do to get involved in what is happening in my state. It's my state. You know, so basically for me, it's not as much as about Adeleke. You could also ask, why did I leave it to others in APC to do the contest? So it means that I felt there's something very unique I have to add. I'm not a superstar, but over the years, and they're not new things. I've spoken about them. I've written about them. So, and
I would like to come in on the aspect of, you said that one of the things that can make a state not borrow or source finance internally is when it leverages on its human capital. And you said in the case of Osun, there are some businessmen that have done exceptionally well for themselves, but do not have investment in the state. So, what do you think can be done differently to sort of invest or invite these people to say, you know what, I want to put my money in my state and watch it develop and grow? What does Osun State, for instance, have that you would say, you know what, it's a leverage for any businessman to jump on? Okay,
let me give you a small story. In 1978, International Breweries in Malaysia was opened. Opening International Breweries and siting in Malaysia was driven by patriotism. To any casual observer who will drink all this beer, how are they going to move it to Lagos? But some people came together and opened that factory and sited it in Malaysia. And for the first few years, everything produced in Tarabi was consumed within the environment where it was produced. I remember in the 80s when we couldn't get it in Lagos. So what am I saying? It depends on thinking out of the box. Where you have a population that we have in Nigeria, there is nothing you produce that cannot be consumed. So when we talk about sustainability, we must think out of the box and look at, okay, this is Osun State. What are the comparative advantages in Osun? Good land, arable land. Lagos doesn't have land. Osun has. Osun can feed Lagos. I remember that the governor of Lagos at the time went as far as I think it was Sokoto to do a partnership on producing some things for them. And they just did something in Niger State. That's thinking out of the, why not Osun? So if you look at your own comparative advantage, there are quite a lot of things you could do. I'll give you, there is cassava, there is maize. If you put a maize, there was a time that all the breweries in the southern part of Nigeria, southwest, were taking some of the inputs into their processing from Lokoja. So if, for example, you decide to process maize in Osun State, and you could get the people to jump on it, you are sure that there are a few off-takers that will secure your investment, and then other people can ride on the back of it. And you don't want to imagine what kind of impact it can be. So it's not all of us that can be a service industry like Lagos. Some of us have to be production.
All right. I wanted you to that.
Oh, yes. Some of us have to be in production. And there's something else that is also missing, and I will tell you this. Is the skills. I was having a conversation recently, and I had said this in another forum long before now, that every school in Osun State can be converted into a skill acquisition center every evening.
All right.
And it goes across a lot of skills.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Dideolu Falobi is a governorship aspirant of Progressives Congress, Osun State. Once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir.